Hello, and welcome to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit.
Wow, talk about a jam-packed podcast episode. This conversation with Cameron Bartlett has it all. Anecdotes, examples, trends, cautionary tales, solutions, trends, strategies, and did I mention cutting-edge trends right from the trenches? That's right. As we talked, Cameron had a story and a trend related to each and every topic we brought up. And it's no surprise. Cameron's a fast-moving, trend-setting, high-growth fundraising consultant who's worked with nonprofits like News Story, IJM, Compassion, Cure, and World Vision to reach hundreds of millions of people and drive important global initiatives. As a veteran fundraising consultant myself, it was exciting to talk with a realistic optimist who sees the same extraordinary potential in nonprofits that I do and motivates those same nonprofits every day. So, if you're looking for a dense discussion that will stimulate your strategies and transfer trends for fruitful fundraising, or you like alliteration, listen in to this episode of the Nonstop Nonprofit podcast.
It is your number one priority to ensure that your business can continue to deliver on its mission, whether it's this year, next year, and beyond.
So we're creating this inclusive environment, building between diverse communities to ensure that our young people can thrive.
I'm always so baffled when I do webinars. There's always somebody at the end who raises their hand and says, I'm the development director. Should I have access to the budget? I'm always like, yes, you've got to know that.
The best thing you can ever do as a nonprofit leader is spend as much money as possible on your story.
Then you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
That is unacceptable, and that is not the way to run a board.
The best thing that we can do is just raise as much money as possible and then give it to the people around the world.
If you're going to be sustainable, you have to have a multi-channel strategy to reach all of these different generations of donors, however they want to be reached.
One of the principal values that we carry as an organization is to lift grace over guilt. And we believe that grace is the greatest agent for change that anyone can ever experience.
We all need each other in terms of other nonprofits working together to solve things.
The more nonprofits can give their donor base that experience of the impact that's being made on the ground level, there's nothing else that you have to give someone. This is Nonstop Nonprofit.
Hello, Nonstop Nonprofit audience. Thank you for tuning in with us for Season 4. I am excited to have a conversation with my friend Cameron Bartlett today. Cameron, thanks for joining on today.
Thanks so much, David. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, Cameron, I have to say I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time now. For those of you in the audience who don't know, Cameron and I have been connected for a while now. We actually, found out through different conversations that we not only have a very similar career trajectory coming from the for-profit sector to the nonprofit sector, which we'll talk about in a minute, Cameron, but also coincidentally, our oldest daughters both have the same name. So this is going to be a fun conversation. I think we're going to end up probably going pretty deep on a couple topics here. Both have a passion for digital marketing and digital fundraising. So I think we'll get to go deep on a couple topics here, and I'm excited to get this episode out.
Yeah. And then we'll just become best friends, right? Like that's how that works, right?
Yes. I thought we already were.
Yeah. No, it sounds good.
So Cameron, a question I like to start all of our podcasts with, can you tell us how you got into the nonprofit sphere? Like what brought you into this space? And then second part of that question, obviously you've been in it for a while now. What's kept you?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out, when I was a kid, like I just knew I wanted to help people. That's what I thought maybe I'd be a psychologist or, just do something to help people. I had found as a kid, like I was able to see the troubles that I had in my own life, the traumas and so forth, and be able to use those opportunities to help others. People would turn to me, and I was like, this is what I want to do, and also when I was in school, when I'd learn about injustices, throughout history, slavery and oppression and all these different things. I was like, gosh, if I lived in a time where that was, where these types of things were happening, I would do something, and like I grew up and I realized like the world is full of injustice. There's still so much going on. And I knew I wanted to help. And so, I started my career. I got to do something fun. I worked in the music industry, which was great. I got to come out to Nashville, which is what brought me here originally, and work with record labels like Sony and others throughout the years, which is really great. I then started working with marketing agencies and being a consultant as well, but those types of agencies that are just like, you've got like 15, 20 clients at a time. There's like a ping pong table and unlimited snacks because they just like never want you to leave the office. They just hope you just work there for like into the night. And we did. And so what I realized though, is that there were, I kind of wondered, these strategies that are helping these companies make a lot of money, like what if we could use these same kind of things, bring them to causes and help them raise more and do more for their cause? And so I got that first opportunity when I worked with the world's largest anti-trafficking organization called International Justice Mission, or IJM. I was a social media manager there, and I got to kind of test these theories out. Could we kind of put together these same kind of strategies and help them grow? And it worked really well. I did, some of the most meaningful campaigns of my life, things that were just really impacted me. And like, we saw change around the world. We saw legislative change. We saw change in people's lives, like in transformation. It was really, really wild. Even some of the campaigns there won awards, which was so wonderful. And so those strategies that I tested out, I was able to kind of package those up and say, hey, let me take these other places. And I got to work for, causes that I'd always loved growing up, like compassion and world vision and cure. And then even cool, innovative ones like New Story that are like 3D printing homes and so forth. It was just really, really cool over the years to be able to work with some of these causes that, have made such an impact in, food and water and education and human rights and all these different things. And I've just really enjoyed being a part of these causes and helping them to grow.
That's awesome. That trajectory from for-profit marketing and agency into nonprofit consulting and fundraising, I think it's a very valuable trajectory. It's something that I looked at early in my career because I actually started my career at a fundraising agency. And I looked at like, okay, who are the titans in this space, the people who are creating generational change. And it's the people who had started or had significant experience in the for-profit sector and then brought those strategies and tactics back and became thought leaders and innovators in the space. So I want to go a little deeper on that with you because you have that unique perspective. When you first made the shift from for-profit marketing agency into nonprofit consulting and fundraising consulting, what was the most important thing you brought with you from the for-profit space that you got the organizations you worked with like IJM and New Story and those organizations? What are some of the things you brought with you that you got them to adopt that helped them?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things that come to mind for sure are when we were in the for-profit space, we were building out these compelling customer journeys. We weren't just looking at our return on investment as like a direct, say like return on ad spend. We spent this amount of money and we got this back, but rather the long-term investment into a customer journey that paid off a lot better in the end, right? So that was investing in lead generation strategies, in building out the stages of, becoming customer, someone becoming more of like an advocate, an evangelist for your brand in a sense, like is I think one of the terms that like HubSpot and their marketing flywheel strategies, would call it. And so bringing that to the nonprofit space and saying like, how do we build a compelling customer journey? How do we kind of pair that with like the wonder, like masterful storytelling you can do at a nonprofit and kind of add that into this, and as well as with the wonderful community of supporters that you have as well, right? And so it was about finding ways to get people to actually become aware of your organization, for us to be able to get them to opt in for something that was compelling, and then create the right kind of automations through email and even ad journeys that followed up with them throughout those series, and then got them to actually to that point where they'd make their first donation. But then also, how do we find ways for people to skip steps? How do we find ways for somebody to come in and go right from becoming a lead to a donor, right? So for instance, I did this test recently with an organization, and we found that if we made an offer right after the lead generating tool, so someone comes in, they take a quiz, or they sign a petition, or they opt in for this downloadable thing or a series of videos, any of those things, right? On that next thank you page, like the confirmation page that they did it, we gave an option for a matched gift. So we had a donor that would match a gift, and we said, hey, if you opt in, if you make a donation right now, after they just give us their email address, they're already in like the process of doing actions to help like become closer with us and engage with us. We gave them that opportunity to give right then and there for a matched gift. And we started to see people giving like at a much higher rate than if they had just gone through our email series. And so now we have people who are starting to actually recoup the cost of the ads that are generating the leads, but then also are getting people much quicker to the point of conversion, right? It's the same thing when someone gives, like using a tool like Fundraise, for instance, like making sure that your fundraising tools are upselling them to recurring donations and things like that too, right? Skipping those steps so that people go right from one step and maybe skip over a few down the journey is really compelling as well. One other really important thing to bring over from the agency world and just the for-profit space in general was just constant optimization, finding ways to make each of those things better, right? So we're talking, I remember in agencies, like you would create all these kind of A/B tests and split tests about just simply understanding if like a button should be green or blue or red, right? And you'd have different tests to see which one performs better. But what's interesting is when you look at all those little details and you start testing all of your different possibilities for subject lines and captions and social posts and photos that you use in ads and all of these different things, like you start testing all of these things and comparing them up against the other options, you start to get like a really optimized strategy that helps you compete with others in the space or other people who are running ads and creating SEO and enriched articles, things like that. But also when you can start looking at some of the details that no one's looking at, then you can actually start to stand out and exceed everyone around you as well. So those are some things that were really key.
I can't help myself. I'm going to take us on a little tangent here because you brought up testing. I love testing and optimization. If anyone's following me on LinkedIn, I talk about it maybe every other week at least. The reason I love it so much is you're always surprised by what happens. So just of all the testing and optimization and things you've done, what's been the most surprising thing you've tested and learned?
Yeah. So I used to do, I still do. I have had this strategy where I start to look at all of these tiny little components of things, right? So like a really good example is for social media. So I started my career in social. So this is a lot of what I would do. I would take all the different components of a social post and determine what was most compelling. All the creative elements to me were data points. There's a caption. So it's not just like, what does the caption say? It's like, how many characters is it? What keywords are you using throughout it? Are you using emojis? How many emojis? Like, are you in your photo, what's in the photo? Are they people, or is this like a landscape photo? Is this like, are there buildings in it of the city that we're talking about? Was there text on the screen? So like if we look at like IJM, for instance, they're a great example, or any of the human trafficking organizations I've worked with, those rescue posts were really important, right? Like us to be able to share what I would call celebration content, showing the impact of your work, right? And so when we would have examples of those posts, I think I had, for instance, a client early on in the music industry that had done, we had done similar kind of content. And I think they were reaching like 1,000 people a month or something like that. And in 6 months, organically, without spending $1 on ads, we were able to grow them to reach about 2 million people a month through their content. So implementing something like that at IJM, we started, to figure out things like when we put text on the screen, on the photo itself to tell people what happened in this rescue, 3 girls were freed or something like that, right? We saw an 80% increase in engagement. When we would thank people in the posts, it would be like a 40% increase in engagement and, like thanking donors, thanking, local law enforcement that we worked with. And so in the first year, we increased our engagement by like 5 times. And then in 2 years, we would see posts that would start to reach, start to get like, 10, 20, 30, even 40,000 engagements, like comments, like shares on these posts. And then like, we did things like this at a news story too, right? And we saw TikToks that would, we had one that reached like 5 million people organically. Like, so it's just, if you can implement some of these strategies, you'll find that like, sometimes it's something like, thanking people. That was really helpful. But sometimes it was literally like the color orange when we had photos with those, it stood out. Or like when we used these types of words, that's actually, those posts normally stood out better because we were saying, celebrate with us or something like that, right? The phrases we'd use. So it was really cool to see that like every component of an email subject line, every, formatting of a landing page, the components of your ad or social post, like every little piece of those things could be used for you to learn what works better or worse and learn from it and then apply it to this like hybrid that becomes your like, I don't know, super powered version of it, which is cool.
That's awesome. There's so much here to unpack. there's so many strategies and things to think about, like from email to social media to ads, and then which ad channel works for my organization, and organic SEO content and website and web CMS and email service provide, like all of these things to unpack, and so many things for the everyday nonprofit marketer. The challenge is as much staying on top of everything, but then also being able to figure out, what do I actually give my attention to? And so that's kind of where I want to go next with our conversation, because in one of our prep calls, you had talked about this concept of the marketing department of one. So I'm going to let you just kind of reintroduce that concept here for us, and then let's talk about how nonprofit marketers, fundraisers can figure out where to prioritize their efforts.
Yeah. So, something I hear a lot from nonprofits, especially as we're talking about like, oh, why don't you try this strategy, or lean into optimization, or build out your donor journey. What I hear often is like, okay, but like I'm already told to do all these different things. I'm a team of one, or we're a team of three, but we all wear multiple hats. We're all doing so many things. Like, where should we actually spend our time, right? And so like a few things that come to mind that are really key here, right? As I've been in those roles, and even when some people think, like, even at some of the big organizations, like, oh, that means you had teams of people. Like, sometimes that was totally the case, but sometimes it was like you were doing the job of 4 or 5 people. And especially when I worked with smaller nonprofits, where we're like, hey, look, we have to do a lot in a little amount of time. The reality is, you just need to do what's most effective, right? And of course, that's what you want to. You want to save time and cut out the stuff that doesn't work, right? So what I found is, one, what you shouldn't do is like learn a new strategy today from any podcast or any conference or anyone you're listening to. And say,
except for this podcast. This is a good podcast to learn something from.
But you shouldn't say, we're going to like wipe the slate clean. We're not doing anything we've done before. We're just focused on this now. You should figure out what is working. You should figure out, okay, well, our emails seem to be what are actually driving our revenue. Or like, I've been with organizations that they're like, all right, well, now that we're going to do digital ads, should we not do direct mail anymore? And like, as a digital marketer, I'm like, oh, that sounds really great. Like, I'd love to have that $20,000, $30,000 that you're spending there, or $2,000 you're spending on sending out letters each year, and let's put it towards ads. That'd be great. But if you don't understand already that maybe, for instance, a lot of your donations are coming from direct mail or from email or from social, whatever that channel is, don't kill it yet, right? Like, figure out what is working and keep doing that, and add the optimizations on top. What you want to cut out to free up for those optimizations are the things that you're just doing because you think you're supposed to do them, right? So I've been with a lot of organizations, and one of the easy ones to cut out is to look at things that when you ask, why are you doing that? And you ask it of yourself or you ask it of your team, they'll often say like, oh, well, somebody, like told me that I was supposed to do it. And then maybe it was something they listened to. Maybe it was somebody on their team in the past. A lot of times it's funny. It'll actually be team members that don't even work there anymore, but they said, hey, you should do this report. And no one's really benefiting from that report that you're spending time on. You just think you're supposed to. Here's another good example. One of the things, especially when I talk about social media with people, is that they have this in their head that like, well, you need to post, there was a time where people thought like 2-3 times a day on Instagram, or even like I need to post every day on social, or 4 or 5 times a week or something. But like, I love giving people the permission to step back and say, I'm not going to keep up with those regimens or those routines. I'm going to instead create great content. And when we have great content to share, that's when we'll post, because it's so much more valuable if you were to create, again, like that celebration content that shows your impact, and you can frame it in a way that is really engaging for people. You're not just maybe just putting up a photo of it, but you have a really good description. Like, you start to learn again over time how to create that content. Again, a good way to do this, if you're not going to be me and be in a bunch of spreadsheets and stuff, is just simply to scroll through your social channels, to go into MailChimp or whatever you're using for your emails, and see which ones got the most opens, and start to be like, oh, what things, like, what can I put together that's working? Look at your different landing pages and see which ones were generating the best results, and say like, oh, okay, you know what? I guess when we keep a button above, where people scroll, and we have a section of credibility where we maybe have a quote from an existing donor, and we don't have too much text, like those pages work really well. these Instagram posts that have like really bright, fun, exciting photos that show like people really happy. Those ones do really well. Like you can start kind of anecdotally going through and determining what is working well, which will then allow you to create better content. And then you can give yourself permission to say like, well, we only got 3 of those this week, so we're going to post 3 times. Honestly, like I've had organizations where I've said, work on, right now you're trying to post every day and you're not reaching anybody because you're just pumping out content and it's so much work for you. Instead, let's focus on putting out 1 great piece of content a week, 1 great piece of content a month, if that's what allows you to create something really compelling. But what that does is it frees you up from having to keep up with these routines that are just like in there. You just like think you need to do it because other people have done it and been successful, or because other people have told you. Like I think for you to be able to do the test yourself, determine what's actually successful, and then build off of that. And then that gives you the freedom to cut all the things that aren't working. For some people, setting up the right kind of, like ad campaigns are not going to be as successful as creating an organic search strategy. For some people, search is not even an option now because you don't have any articles right now. You have to start from scratch. So really, it should be something that you maybe do as a small test. It takes up 1% of your time, but it's not something that you're going to now drop all of your email marketing campaigns and just go for an SEO strategy. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about, of making sure you're sticking with what's working, leaving space for you to try new things, and then leaving time for you to optimize what's already working. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you set up the right kind of donor journeys, and lean into, and I guess we could talk about this later too, but obviously automation is really key here, because the more time you can spend on creating one thing that repeats itself a bunch, the more time you'll save for the future as well.
Yeah, I think an undertone to a lot of what you're talking about too is the less resources you have, the better your technology needs to be able to support the resources you do have. And that's something that, we talked about coming from the for-profit agency into the nonprofit sector. That was the thing that surprised me the most, is not just the lack of resources I expected, right? You expect that nonprofit organizations, fundraisers, marketers, they're not going to have access to the same capital, the same resources, the same headcount that a for-profit company does. But what surprised me the most was how antiquated the infrastructures that marketers were inheriting were. And they're trying hey, let's build donor journeys, and let's build automations, and let's build welcome series, and let's build drip series and lead gen and lead nurture and all of these things that are really important. But then, you're looking at okay, I got to fly a plane here, but I'm got a cobblestone street, right? I can't do what I'm supposed to do. And that's ultimately what led me into the nonprofit technology space, is I got so tired of hearing organizations want to do the things that they need to do to succeed, but be limited by poor technology. So I said, look, I'm going to go spend all of my time helping organizations understand that there is better technology for them. So that way, when you are that marketing department of 1 or 2 or 3, and you're wearing 5 different hats, you have the infrastructure to support you to be able to do the content tests, to run different campaigns, to automate so much of your day to day. So you can, like you're talking about, focus on those actually high impact functions, gathering stories, telling stories, learning from campaigns that you're running and tests that you're running, learning and optimizing. I feel like those are the things that are going to make the biggest impact, that often fall by the wayside because you got to run that report, or you've got to set up that spreadsheet, or you've got 15 emails to respond to, right? So it's having, I think the undertone here, bring it back, is the more your technology is set up to support you and support what you're doing, the more efficient, productive, and effective you're going to be with the limited resources that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the habits you can keep too. I was just talking about recently, giving yourself permission to even time block and say, I'm only going to work on these things during these certain times. And outside of that, you won't, because it shouldn't take up more than that time. And when someone asks you to do something in that, as long as they're okay with it, you say, look, I actually have that plan for Thursday at 10. And you don't have a million things in your head. You actually are hey, I have a time plan for that. And that gives you the freedom to say no until that time for you to do those things too.
Yeah. And now, enjoy this break from your friends at Fundraise, the nonprofit industry's most innovative fundraising platform.
Fundraise provides exceptional, innovative, and friendly fundraising technology focused on nonprofit growth. Made for fundraisers by fundraisers, our state-of-the-art platform integrates every core aspect of front and back-end fundraising management into a convergent platform perfect for nonprofiteers like you. Every day, we celebrate nonprofits like UNHCR and National Wildlife Federation as they trust Fundraise to power fundraising campaigns around the world. Warning, we go through a lot of confetti. Get started raising the funds and the fun at fundraise.org. That's FUNRAISE.org.
Now that you've heard how Fundraise can level up your fundraising game, let's get back to the conversation. So, Cameron, I wouldn't be a good digital marketer, wouldn't be a good fundraiser if we didn't take some time to transition here and talk about Giving Tuesday and year end, because, you know, we're right on the cusp of giving season here. Organizations are, people are coming back from summer vacations. Everyone's back in school. Things are getting back into full swing. People are starting to plan galas. People are starting to plan fundraising campaigns. And I think the expectation is we should talk about strategies and what to do. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do what's expected of us. I want to do something that's actually helpful. So when you are listening to this podcast, you actually can take something away from this podcast episode. So let's start by looking at Giving Tuesday, year end, that critical 6 to 8 week slice of the end of the year where we know you're going to make 60, 70, 80% of your annual revenue. Most fundraisers I work with, and when I was a fundraiser, we're talking 10, 12, 15-hour days. You wake up and open your laptop and you go to sleep with your laptop on your lap some days. What are ways that this year, we can tap into this mindset of, the marketing department of one and being hyper efficient? What are some ways that you've found to be successful, efficient, and also stay sane during that peak fundraising window?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things that come to mind for sure. One is to find ways to start talking about what your campaign is going to be before you start fundraising for it. So, a great example of this is, a campaign that we did at IJM called Super Marco. We started this one, probably more than a year out. And so you can still take some of these things for if you have a shortened time frame and you're thinking of doing it either, this year still or next year. But, we had kind of, taken on this new crime that we were addressing called cyber sex trafficking, and this is this horrifying thing that was occurring where Western men were abusing over the internet young children, 5 years old, dude. I can't. Those stories are just horrifying, right? So we had to determine, how do we talk about this thing? This is a very difficult thing. How do we stop it? And so we wanted to find ways to create content about what this was. We had a landing page on our website about it. We started creating a series of emails, social content about it. We would share rescues, obviously, which became some of the most engaging content there. But then also we took things a step further and we created a series of videos. So it was a video called "What is Cyber Sex Trafficking?" That was the first one, right? Just an intro to it. The next one was about a girl named Cassie and her experience with it. And then the third one was this short film called Super Marco. And it was about a 7-year-old boy named Marco and his 2-year-old sister, Gabby. And we knew that if people watched this film, they would give to this, they would help us and, really make a dent and end this crime. So what we realized is that all the content that we had created weren't just kind of pumping things out for no reason. They were steps along a digital journey, right? And so we found that if we could create audiences of people who had engaged with those social posts, watched those videos, been to the landing page, opted in for something related to this, they were people who were familiar with cyber sex trafficking, and we wanted them to go through a series. So we would set up ads that would take people who are organically engaged with things and get them to watch the first video, the cyber sex trafficking video, and then the second one, and leading into the Super Marco short film. I think when we launched it, again, we had to put all kinds of sensitivities around. This is a really difficult thing to talk about. We had to block it in some countries and put age restrictions on the video. Like, it was possible that nobody saw this video. Like, there was a chance we worked on an alternate campaign in case this didn't go. And I remember we get ready to launch this thing, and we did a Facebook Live, and 50,000 people joined us to like get ready to launch this thing on this Facebook Live. And then we launched the video, and we had just like done what was called this like a thunderclap moment. We asked everyone to kind of watch and share at the same time, and it reached over 1 million people. And then we just started running those ads that then like ran people through the whole series and watching it, and then got people ready to give, and ran ads directly to that. And so obviously, if we had done this before and told people about this crime, like, people would have given for sure. But because we had created this journey that led people through this, we were able to reach like 11 million people and raise $4.8 million to end cyber sex trafficking. And I think one thing to learn from the quick wins of how you can implement this year is, if you are specializing your campaign around a specific type of work that you do, or a specific community where you're working and you need to they have specific needs, that is a really great thing to do for your year-end campaign. You tell stories about people from that community, or you tell stories of people who had experienced that. Go back through the year and see when you've talked about that. Or do you have pages on your website where people are already visiting that? Do you have videos about it that you've already released? Could you create those in these warmed audiences? Could you use that old video that was about this thing and start maybe running some ads to get people to want to learn more about it? Could you kind of put some of those pieces together to say like, hey, let's let people watch this. Let's see if they can engage with this post, and let's see if we can get them to this landing page. Kind of start warming them now before fundraising season even starts. I think it's really key to have breaks where you're not asking people to give. For instance, we did this at a few different organizations like Exodus Road and Vow for Girls and so forth, but we created a news story as well. Like, we took breaks normally in October where we didn't ask for a bunch of gifts during those times. We created a series of emails that were around that celebration content. How do you show your impact and thank people? What was great about that content is there was no ask in it. We just wanted to thank people and show them like how great it was that they were a part of this, and like show them what their donation is doing, or what it could do if they were just supporters and hadn't given. And so we had kind of started warming our audiences and started to get like 30, 40, 50% open rates, right? And even higher, 60, 70 at times. And then we started asking as the campaign went on. And we did these really cool tests. So if you can warm your audience enough to start opening, you can send a lot more emails during the campaign. So we actually did these tests with several organizations that during, let's say, end of year fundraising, we could send something leading up to Giving Tuesday. You could have it maybe the week beforehand, the day before, and then on the day. We found that we could send up to 4 emails in one day without seeing unsubscribe rates raise, and with continually receiving more donations during that time. And so I would find ways to get people to open your emails now without asking them anything, so that you can test if during the campaign you could simply write a few, take a little more time to write a few more emails on that day, and you will raise more money on that day. So even if you're like, hey, look, I only have 10 emails in me that I could write for a whole campaign, space those out and then clump them right towards the end of the campaign when most people are going to give. And you could potentially test out sending 2, 3, 4 emails on Giving Tuesday or on the last day of the year, or things like that with increased urgency. Tests like that are really helpful, again, with giving people breaks. So you're just thanking them and then making really clear strategic asks when you're ready.
That's awesome. So if I heard you, it's, distilling down into a sentence would be build momentum, understand when, where, and how people engage with you, then use automation and technology and tools readily available to you to get rid of as many manual steps as possible. Like, there's no way, like you told that story of reaching, I think it was 50 million people and raising almost $5 million. There's no way even a large, well-resourced team could have manually handled each of those steps, each of those triggers, each of those processes. It's building that momentum and understanding which stage is indicative of an activity, and then using the tools available to us as fundraisers now to automate that process. So you can automate that growth and be real time to as many people as possible at scale. So I think that's a great thing, and probably a tip for people to take away now, because we still are months out from Giving Tuesday and year end. You have time to learn how to use these tools and to test where in you can pull those levers at different points in the journey. But then the other thing you talked about is building relational capital. I think that's so critical now, because we so often fall into the trap of, okay, it's fall, I got to ask for money, because we know we're going to raise so much over the next 12 weeks of this quarter, the 12 weeks of Q4. We raise most of our revenue for the year. We know we're going to, so we fall into the trap of, okay, well, I just got to ask and ask and ask and ask. And then next year I can thank, right? Because if I don't ask, I won't get. I think there's that fear. But what you talked about is building that relational capital and building that thanks and that donor joy about being an investor in a cause gives you so much flexibility as a fundraiser to then turn around and ask and make that ask when it's most important. When you know people are primed to give. Giving Tuesday, the final week of the year, we know people are going to be ready to give. And I know there's tons of debates in this space about you should do Giving Tuesday, you shouldn't do Giving Tuesday. People shouldn't give just because it's a day. Just because it's a day doesn't mean you should. People are ready to give on Giving Tuesday. People are ready to give year end. It's like, we know that to be true. Every year, the numbers increase. Year over year for the last 10 years, I think, is Giving Tuesday has been around for 10 or 11 years now. So that's my tangent soapbox. You need to be participating, but just because you need to do it doesn't mean you need to do it like everyone else is doing it. I love that idea of building relational capital going in to a season where you're going to ask for a lot.
I think something that's really key during as you're getting ready for big campaigns is to think about the other actions you can ask people to take that will actually make your job easier. One of the big questions that people often get in nonprofits, I would get this especially all the time monitoring social media, is like, okay, I love what you're doing. How do I help without giving? If you can create other actions that people can take, they can be really valuable to help propel a campaign forward. You could ask people to, start a fundraiser early on. A really great simple thing you can do is ask people who are going to set up fundraisers to do it on November 1st, as opposed to like just before Giving Tuesday or just in December. We did this with the Exodus Road. We put on a campaign called Kids Who Should Never Be Sold. And we asked people to set up their peer-to-peer campaigns on November 1st. And, we did them even within the team, we created incentives. Like I went out and bought a bunch of great fair trade, delicious chocolate. And I would give it to the team member that had either fundraised the most or posted about it the most or so forth. We asked our board members to do it. We asked our donors. We even got together with supporters and did this whole just fun thing where we had t-shirts and had fake tattoos of the slogan of the campaign and everything. But it was fun because then everyone who came to the event, we asked them to just set up their campaign. We could ask them to post photos or do all the different things. And we did, do a photo shoot. So they had some of that content. But what was most important is that we asked them one thing of set up your peer-to-peer fundraiser and set it up early. And we increased the peer-to-peer donations by 79% that year over year. It was a big, big deal. And I think, the real key to one of these asks is to make a big ask. So ask a lot for people to do something that's really easy, that makes a huge difference and propels that campaign forward. Another thing I think of is when I was at IJM, something happened where it was this unprecedented event. Some of our colleagues were kidnapped and later murdered, and we needed to, at the time, find them. We didn't know where they were. We didn't know what happened. And so we needed to call upon the president in Kenya to help us find this. We knew it ended up going. It was a layer of corruption that went up to some senior officials in the police department as well. And so we needed help from the government as well. And so we knew the biggest thing that we could do was to have people tweet at the Kenyan embassy in DC. It was a time when tweeting meant if they got 10 or 20 tweets about a certain issue, it could make it to the president's docket of what they would review. And so in this Twitter account that, probably got 5 tweets a year at it, in 24 hours had 30,000 tweets of supporters all over the world. We worked with people in Kenya as well as here in the US and so forth. And we were able to catch so many tweets because, one, we, with everything asked, we were asking in emails, we were reaching out to like personal contacts and like celebrity influence. Like we reached out to everybody in every way possible. But then we created baked in a way for the campaign to grow itself, a little virality into it, where basically if you were to tweet it, it came with this link in the retweet that then sent you to a landing page where all you had to do is do a click to tweet, and it would retweet the whole thing with the link in it again. And it just kind of created this echoing effect that just reverberated and allowed it to just grow itself. So instead of saying like, everybody post wherever you want to about it, or hey, any way that you want to get involved, here's how you can get involved, like do whatever you want. We were like very clearly, if you have a Twitter account, please tweet this, click this, share this here. And it allowed it to grow so much faster because we asked this one thing of everyone, and that one thing had this virality baked into it and allowed it to propel itself forward. So whenever you can do that, so that's ask people to do, a peer-to-peer fundraiser. We had a campaign like the supermarket campaign there that we asked people to just watch and share the video, and that's what propelled it forward organically, right? Things like that. You finding the thing that will make your job easier because now people are going to help you like push this campaign forward, that aren't just opportunities to giving those people a place, including if you ask your team and your board and everyone to set up those peer-to-peer campaigns, it's going to now share the load of your campaign goal on everybody, and it spreads it across and makes it easier for you.
Fun fact, for those who aren't super familiar with peer-to-peer fundraising, the average value of a peer-to-peer fundraiser, which is someone who hosts a peer-to-peer campaign on your behalf, is more than 10 times the current average online gift. So what you're talking about there, one, having a very clear ask, like make it unbelievably clear what you want someone to do. Don't have more than one ask. Don't have a vague ask. Don't be soft, be direct, be clear with your ask. But then ask for something that's easy, that's high value. So the friction for someone doing it is low. Like, hey, send a tweet. Like that friction's very low and it's very direct. Or rather than, hey, take pictures, post them on social media, talk about us, tell your friends about us, send an email about us. It's set up your fundraising campaign right now. And guess what? You probably could have replaced that with, hey, everyone here, pull out your checkbook and make a gift. You would have had a successful campaign fundraising there. But if every one of those people who pulled out their checkbook or credit card to make a gift there actually went and just logged in and made a campaign site, you just 10x'd the impact of that moment by having a clear ask and giving someone something that has high impact with low friction. So I really like that too. So Cameron, I think that kind of really brings us to a good closing point here. But as always, I want to ask closing thoughts from you. If someone wants to take the next big step as a digital fundraiser, a digital marketer this year, what is something they can start trying now that will pay dividends in time for giving season this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'd return to creating that celebration content and finding how you can collect those stories and establishing that story gathering process. It is some of the most valuable content you can create. It has the reward of deep levels of engagement from your supporters, attracting new people to actually becoming donors, making people who have been donors for years be like, yeah, heck yeah, that's why I do this. Like it is wonderful content that reaches everybody at every stage of the journey. And it's not just the big wins either, right? Like at the human trafficking organizations I've worked at, several, like when we would talk about those rescues from trafficking, of course, those were like great stories to share. We could also show change over time, right? We could see like, hey, 10 years ago, like there were kids being sold in the streets in these places, and now these places are safe and families are living here and this is okay. Like it'd also be things like if you work with an education nonprofit, like it's someone who wasn't able to test before is now doing really great in school, someone who's now entered your program, someone who now graduated. There are so many points, even like someone who's graduated in the past and is coming back to like support kids or just got a really great job. Like you can be a part of each of those points of stories that you can share and thank and celebrate your donors. And so being able to collect that content is helpful for deepening your relationships with supporters, attracting in new people, and helping people to give more in the long run.
Awesome. It's such a fundamental value. Gratitude goes so far, particularly in our industry where people are giving out of compassion rather than out of reciprocation. Having gratitude, one of the age-old adages I picked up early on in my fundraising career is thank 7 times for every one ask, right? Or 7 ways for every one way you ask, right? So that is such an important piece. Cameron, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom with our audience, giving us a peek behind the curtain of how you lead marketing teams and your success so far. If anyone listening wants to get to know you better, follow up with you or follow you, where's a good place for them to reach out?
Yeah, I love LinkedIn. I think it's a great place to just build community and meet people. I love hopping on a call or meeting up for coffee and just kind of getting to know people and sharing what I know. I love being able to share that. I also have great resources on my website at cambartlett.com. cambartlett.com/SEO is a great thing about all SEO stuff. There's website stuff and email and social and ads and all kinds of stuff there. So great resources for you to learn there, or just say hello, and I love to connect.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, thank you for your time. And I look forward to many more conversations like this.
Thank you, David. Yeah, same. Can't wait.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nonstop Nonprofit. This podcast is brought to you by your friends at Fundraise, nonprofit fundraising software built for nonprofit people by nonprofit people. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn or text me at 714-717-2474. And don't forget to get your next episode the second it hits the internets. Find us on your favorite podcast streaming service, hit that follow button, and leave us a review to help us reach more nonprofit people like you. See you next time.